interest to you. Last time we had the folks at Dickerson Baker talk about fundraising and some of the trends that we're seeing during COVID. Before that, we've had folks like Dallas Jenkins talking about filmmaking. We've had Dr. Albert Moeller, talking about some of the cultural issues that we're facing. You can access all of our previous NRB Live broadcasts either on our Facebook page, the NRB Association Facebook page, or also our YouTube channel. And so you can go back and watch those. But we are excited to have another really good guest with us today. I'll talk about him in a moment. I just wanted to remind everyone too that we have opened up registration for our NRB convention in March. We're very excited about having a live in-person convention in Texas at the Gaylord Texan the week of March 15th through the 18th. And we've already had a great week and a half of registration, one of the best kind of opening weeks we've had in several years. And we've got a lot of people really excited about getting together to network, to be equipped. We're actually nailing down the speaker lineup. We've announced some speakers, and there's a few that we're waiting for invites. We're going to have a great time focusing on kind of all aspects of Christian media, from our traditional radio and television, which is vitally important to getting the good news of the gospel out, all the way across to podcasting and streaming and film and all the kind of ministries and organizations that kind of help our ministries run. And so we encourage you to go to nrbconvention.org and register. And if you'd like to exhibit and sponsor, to check out those options as well. Well, today I'm really excited to have the CEO of 5Q, which I know many of our members are familiar with. Chad Williams is our CEO, or is the CEO of 5Q. And he is obviously someone that, if you have gone to NRB conventions and in the past, you've heard him speak and have interacted with him. But Chad and his team have really been helping our members sort of be on the cutting edge when it comes to our digital footprint and our digital content. And there's never been a better and more important time to have a digital footprint than now, and during this strange year in 2020, where a lot of us ministries have had to pull back and do digital only, whether it's a church environment or it's many of our ministries who were event-based and had to do remote events. And then all of ministries that continue to serve their audiences with really good, important spiritual content. So Chad, thanks for joining me today here on NRB Live, and I'm glad you were able to take some time to speak with us today.
Yeah, thanks so much, Dan. Really appreciate the invitation, and excited to share with you in these crazy times that we're living in.
So Chad, before we talk, you have really like 5 keys to a really good digital presence for a ministry, and I want to get into those. But before we do that, I want to ask you a few questions about the times kind of we're in. We were talking before we got on here just about the challenges facing ministries and some of the things in terms of working from home and pulling back from events and doing digital. Maybe share with us a little bit about what has surprised you about the way that ministries have been able to adapt digitally, and maybe some things that you're helping and encouraging ministries to do in this season.
Yeah, no, that's a good question. One of the things that when we're interacting with folks, and in fact, I shared this with a number of the ministries that we worked with, but I also shared it with my kids. As you and I were talking beforehand, we both have kids that are in school, and they're facing challenges right now too. And any time that we face a challenge or face an experience that kind of shakes our world, like what COVID has done, we really have 2 choices of how we're going to respond, 2 zones we can move into. We can either choose to move into a growth zone, or we can choose to move into a panic zone. And I think we've all seen both responses, both by the general public and by ministries and by churches. And just an example of moving into the growth zone, the first thing about that is just recognizing, hey, I don't have all the answers, but I'm going to see what opportunities that the Lord might be bringing our way. and hold things that we currently do with an open hand and see how do we need to shift and change to respond to the needs as they're coming. So one organization, when they first started shutting down the flights and shutting down all the sending people home from work, this organization said, you know, people are looking for answers, looking for hope. And so in 5 days, they went from concept to execution of a brand new YouTube channel called Grounded. And it ended up being a daily YouTube channel that ran for, I think I heard like 60 days, 60 to 80 days. And then it's transitioned over into a live YouTube channel that they went from, again, from conception to launching it live just in 5 days. So that's just one example of leaning into the growth zone, as opposed to pulling back and opposed to cutting staff and seeing, you know, pulling back and saying, okay, just kind of shriveling up and saying, just trying to hold your own. So that's the first, is a mindset of a growth zone versus a panic zone. Mm-hmm. What was the second question you had asked? You'd asked
just what are some, I think you kind of answered both, you know, when you talked about what surprised you, but also ways that ministries are adapting. And I think that's a really interesting, I think the way that you framed it, you know, panic on the one hand or growth on the other. It does seem like leaders in this time have to kind of navigate the tension between kind of fear and panic on the one hand, but also being sober about the realities and not kind of burying your head in the sand. And so it seems like ministries are trying to kind of navigate in that space there.
Yeah. And the other, you know, one other thing that I have been surprised by, that maybe I shouldn't have been, I don't know, but the organizations, including local churches as well as ministries, everyone that I've talked to that is not primarily event-based, every single one has their fundraising up during this season. And that was somewhat of a surprise, especially for churches when they're going from passing that offering plate every Sunday to anywhere from 100% to, in our case, I think about 30% of our congregation is still doing the online thing and not meeting in person. You know, our giving is actually up compared to where it was this time last year. And we've seen that across the board with almost without exception the ministries that we work with the exception of those that have relied on events for their fundraising, when they had to close that event or cancel it, or a big vision gatherings or casting the vision for their big major donor events. Those are the organizations that have been hurt, understandably so. But I've been surprised and encouraged to see the body of Christ really come around those organizations that in real times of need.
So you have really 5 keys or 5 important things for a digital footprint that organizations really need to think about when they think about digital. So if you could walk through those, I think for us, I think that would be really helpful for everybody kind of watching.
Yeah, you bet. So a lot of times when people start thinking of digital, the first thing they think of is social media and what do we need to do on social media or their website or mobile app, and what do I need to do? And doing is important, but I think it's especially important to take a step back and to make sure that we have the right mindset when it comes to how we're thinking about digital. And so that's what we've called this the 5 marks of a healthy digital mindset, just to help ministries especially and ministry leaders specifically to understand how it is we should be thinking about an effective digital presence. So that first mark of a healthy digital mindset is that digital is ministry. It's not just a channel. And you know, a lot of, especially in the early days, a lot of folks would look at their website or look at their digital either as a marketing avenue or as a fundraising channel, which it is. Digital is both of those. It's marketing and it's fundraising, it's branding, it's all that. But having a mindset that, man, digital is ministry. We can actually impact people's lives through the things that we do, the content, our presence, our interactions with people in the digital space. That really transforms the way that you think about digital. And that it opens up the mind about, okay, we may be doing this in the offline space. Well, how can we accomplish that in the online space? And so the first mark is that of the healthy digital mindset is that it's ministry, not just a channel. The second mark, and feel free to jump in if you have any questions on anything, Daniel. Otherwise, I'll just rattle right through.
I like that. Before we go to the second one, I like where you said that digital is ministry, not just a channel, right? And so that probably keeps us from trying to take whatever we would do in an analog way or not digital way and kind of stuff it into a thing rather than adapt it, right?
A great example is, again, I'm going to go back to the early days, radio preaching ministries or radio teaching ministries. They're like, okay, this website, what should we be doing? Well, we need to be putting our radio program, whether before podcast, whether it's on the website or podcast or whatever. And they say, okay, now we're digital. But the famous adage, the medium is the message, and being able to not just taking verbatim what you're doing on the air, but also how can we shape it to the digital space. A great example of that is Northwest Media out of the radio station up in Minneapolis, and how instead of just live streaming, which they do offer live streaming on their radio stations, but they've also will take the content that the radio on-air personalities produce, and they'll chop that up into little segments and make it available in a podcast format on their website and all the different channels. And so they're not just regurgitating, they're adapting the content to the medium in which they're communicating. And so that's just another example of how you have a ministry mindset as you're looking at the various opportunities that there are in the digital space.
Yeah, that's good. Let's walk through the next couple points of how to have a good digital footprint.
So first is ministry, not channel. The second is that it's relationship and conversation, not simply proclamation. And this is something we've been saying for years, even before Facebook and social media was around. Now it's like, well, duh, yeah, of course it is. It's about a two-way conversation that happens usually in the social media space. But what are the implications of that, of thinking about it as relationship, not just proclamation? Well, the implications are, for an organization, are we staffed up? Are we staffed up enough to be able to respond to people who are on our Facebook page? Are we able to treat every person that comes to our website and a contact form as a person, not just as a number that's coming there? And so just having a mindset that the folks that are coming, those hits or those users or those visitors that are coming to your website aren't just a number, but they actually are people. And so having a mindset of relationship. And tied to that is the third mark of a healthy digital mindset, and that's that it's personalized, not generic. And just think about, Dan, think about every time you go to Amazon. Every time you go to Amazon, everything that you do, everything that you see in there is tailored to you. And whether you just bought this and it makes all kinds of other recommendations. In the ministry space, we have the opportunity to do that kind of personalization, but very, very few ministries are doing it. And just imagine if, let's just take NRB. Take NRB's website and specifically the conference website. Imagine if a person first comes to the conference website and we're able to tell if they've signed up for the conference or not. If they've not, if this is their first time visit, maybe we're going to ask for their email or give them a call to action that's going to help them learn more about the conference. If then the next time they come back, we can say, hey, maybe they haven't yet signed up for the conference, but we know they've been there before and we've been able to see which categories or which areas they're engaged in. So then we can say, hey, consider signing up for the conference. You can tell your interest in church media. Now, we can tell that just by what they looked at on the website. So then they sign up for the conference, and the next time they come back to the site, why would we ask them if they want to register for the conference again? Well, we already know because they've already registered. So then we can give them a teaser about what's coming up. So again, you're personalizing the experience based on what we know their activity has been with you in the past. And you can apply that principle to fundraising on the website, to the marketing, your whole user channel, all those things. And so the tools are out there, and the tools are out there to be able to allow you to personalize those things in a very, very specific way these days.
Yeah, that's really good. And you have obviously you've helped a lot of ministries do that personalization really well. What are a couple more ways that we can really maximize our digital ministry?
Yeah, so on the personalized site, one thing I would mention, if you want to know how to personalize your site, just go to a website, journity.com, and that's a product. I'll just, full disclosure, this is a product that we've built, but it's helped ministries specifically be personalized in their website interactions.
And I want to also give a shameless plug, not just for 5Q, but also the Chad is also going to be teaching on personalization at NRB in a workshop this year. So if you're very interested in taking your website to the next level and how to kind of do that and personalize based on this third point, I think coming to NRB in March would be a great way. Okay, let's hear the last couple of points.
Yeah, so first, ministry; second, relationship; there's personalized; fourth is that a good digital presence is integrated and ubiquitous. So what does that mean? Integrated in terms of its messaging. So what you're communicating in the digital space is right in line with everything that you're communicating in the offline world, in your direct mail, in your marketing, on your radio programs, on your radio station, whatever it is. You're communicating the same way, so you don't get a disconnect between it. So you have integrated messaging. And the other thing is that it integrated from a technology standpoint. So that, and that's where the ubiquitous comes in, is that the technology, the digital, really touches everything in an organization. And so if you find yourself as an organization like dual entering data in 2 or 3 or 4 places, then you need to take a step back and say, are we using our staff in ways that are most effective, and just in terms of effectively using their time? And so bringing technology to your back-end operations, helping things be more integrated, helping remove errors. That can be another, again, it's about using resources wisely. It can be bring another lift to your organization. And just wanting to integrate both your messaging and your technology throughout your organization.
Mm-hmm. That's really good. Just kind of having that seamless intake. I think it's not something that people always think about, but trying to be as efficient and wise as we can with all that's really important.
Yeah, I was talking with one president of a college actually, and this was years ago when he took over, and he said, the fundraising department, there were literally checks that they found in the desk because it wasn't automated, and it wasn't they weren't using technology effectively. And then when they're able to come on, put in a good constituent relationship management software, make sure everybody on the team knows what's being communicated to the donors, and then being able to process those more effectively and more efficiently, it allowed their team to focus on people, not on tasks.
That's really good. So what's the final point here?
Yeah, so first is ministry, second is relationship, third is personalized, fourth is that it's integrated, and fifth is that it's dynamic, not static. And that just means that, man, this space is constantly changing. And so whatever you're doing now, hold it with an open hand, because you don't know whether that thing that you're doing now is going to be effective next. I mean, in these COVID days, you could almost say next week or next year, let alone the next decade. And so the importance of that is, I remember one time when this would have been before I started 5Q, I was working inside of a ministry, and was in the process of building up a digital team, And I was actually writing my own content management system. I'm a little techie at heart, even though I don't have any formal training on the programming side. But I was, for a couple months, just was heads down programming this content management system. And again, this was probably almost 20 years ago. And I remember getting towards the end of that and just going to a conference. And at conference, they were talking about this thing called RSS, and that had been around for a couple months. And I can remember I felt like I was a mole poking my head out of the ground and looking around and seeing that the landscape had changed from when I was like in the weeds working on stuff. And so just knowing that this space is going to change on a regular basis. And so it's important to partner with, it's important to be able to, for an organization to be able to keep the pulse on not just the latest and greatest, because fads come and fads grow, but to be able to keep a pulse on what is effective in helping organizations kind of move the needle when it comes to the digital space. And Dan, one trap I would say that organizations fall into on the dynamic side, they usually either fall into one area, which is anything that's shiny. They think, well, we need to be doing this.
Yeah.
The other angle is well, they don't make any change at all. And I've seen ministries fall on both realms. And when I was actually working inside of a ministry, kind of the guideline that I used and for inside an organization that wants to be wise stewards of the resources and still be able to be not on the bleeding edge, but at least somewhat on the cutting edge, is what I call a 10% rule. So if the population, if the audience that you're serving, if 10% of that population is adopting that technology, you should think about serving it, adding it to your lineup. And the reverse side is too, if less than 10%, or if it's declining, if you have a technology that is declining and less than 10% of your audience is using it, then you really don't need to invest the resources to support that if it's on the way out. So
that's
go ahead.
A really good rule, because one of my I have a couple follow-up questions because on that last one, because I think it's really important that we've seen ministries that, and I've been at ministries on all sides of what you described. I've seen ministries that kind of saw the internet as kind of that thing that they kind of have to update, and hopefully they can find some kid that can do it. I think those days are behind us, because I think most people are taking it seriously. But there's not a dynamic aspect that we need to constantly be updating this. On the other hand, you do see, I think, a temptation for ministries, churches, whatever, to try to do everything digitally. And I guess my question, it does seem that it's important for ministries to kind of know what they can do and what their limits are and what their mission is, to kind of avoid both of those ditches, right?
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, you have to start with your mission and vision, and then to be able to see how can technology empower and enable an organization to scale. And that, I mean, scaling is an important piece of that too. And just because Joe Blow ministry down the road is doing it doesn't mean it's going to be a good fit for your organization, either from a mission vision or from a user base standpoint.
That's a great word. I want to talk a little bit about digital ministry during this time of COVID. One of the things that, talking to a lot of people in this space, that they've been saying, and I'm sure you've had these conversations as well, is that obviously the coronavirus has been devastating, and it's been a really tough year, to have to cancel live events and to only do remote things. And there is obviously a limit, it seems like, to how much screen time and how much Zoom we can all handle, whether it's our kids doing school or all of us doing Zoom events. So it does seem there could be a little bit of a fatigue there. On the other hand, one of the silver linings, it does seem this has forced all of us, all of our ministries and churches, big and small, to kind of become a little bit more digitally proficient. And so I guess my question is, with the innovations we're having to see in the digital space, based on necessity, it does seem like a lot of these things will stay even after we get back to somewhat normal, right? That some of the ways that our ministries have offered things online, some of the way we're doing content, the way we're able to kind of adapt in this way, it just seems like some of the stuff will stay, will it not?
Yeah, no, that's a really good point. And even the way that we work, I was sharing with you just before we came online here, is that there was a survey or a poll research that Garner did within the last month or 6 weeks or so. And they said that before COVID, less than 30% of the workforce was working from home. And their projection is that after COVID, at least 48% of the workforce will work from home. And so as an organization, how are you going to respond to that? Are you going to bring everybody back in the building? Are you going to do a mix, a half and half, even a mix with individuals? Individuals may be in a role that they could work partly from home and partly from work. And so that's one area where just the way we work, that technology has empowered and enabled us to work that way, is going to have a difference when we come back.
And it does seem the way that people consume content might change, right? Because if spiritual content, because if you don't have a long commute, that could affect things you're listening to. But then if you're at home, you might have space for other kinds of content. So I'm curious what you're, and it's probably too soon to kind of really gauge that, but I'm curious if you're seeing any trends in terms of what kind of digital content is being, consumed.
Yeah, so I mentioned the organization Revive Our Hearts that rolled out their grounded video YouTube channel in just 5 days. And as they've continued to listen to the marketplace and be nimble, they did the first, I think 60, 75 days, I don't remember exactly. Then they've taken a short break, and now they're rolling that out in a weekly format. And so I think you'll see some of that. You'll see people that have made radical changes, maybe churches adding live stream for the first time, or churches that have really amped up their live stream. So they realize it's not just amplifying what is going on in the church building, because nobody's in the church building. So therefore, how do we actually do church ministry in a digital space? And there's difference. And so some of those things that we've learned about interacting with that online audience from a church standpoint, I think those are gonna stay with us. And we can continue to see growth on the podcast side of things. And I hadn't actually thought about what you said. How is the drive time going to impact that? That'll be interesting to see. Yeah. I have been seeing a shift more towards like where we're at right now. You and I are on a YouTube live stream, and YouTube is just growing like gangbusters, especially for organizations. I'm looking in the secular space, especially for the secular space, when there any kind of teaching or explaining or how-tos. I mean, those YouTube channels are just taking off like crazy. And I'm looking forward to seeing ministries like Revive Our Hearts did with Grounded continue to say, okay, how can we use YouTube, the YouTube channels? Yeah, it's been around a long time, but I think folks are just now starting to see how can we capture, really utilize it effectively for growing and getting their content out there.
Yeah, that's a great point. I mean, everyone is really more proficient at this. And I think we're realizing, I can do a webinar, I can do Zoom easier than I thought. And, the technological literacy has risen, right? Because everyone from my mom to my youngest daughter all know how to use Zoom, know how to make it work. And so I think that's going to have an impact too. I wanted to jump back a little bit as we close here about one of the things you said that, and this is one of the things we're thinking about with the NRB convention, that coming out of COVID, there's going to be a lot of folks who have said, well, we're a medium-sized church or a medium-sized ministry, and we didn't really do a lot of live stream. We didn't really do a lot of digital stuff, but we were forced to. And now that we're kind of past COVID, or we're coming out of COVID, we want to continue to be able to do this. So how do we do it well? How do we kind of up our game, if you will? And so this year, the programming at NRB, there's, it's across all the media. So the typical offerings we typically have, but we've added a few more sessions and workshops on specifically digital things. For instance, church media, live streaming, podcasting, all that, so that those who are coming out of this saying, hey, if you're a church communications director of a medium-sized church, and you're saying, we've been live streaming for 5 or 6 months or 8 months. We want to continue to do this even as we regather. How do we do that? So just want to let everybody know if you're interested to register at nrbconvention.org. We have registration available. But Chad Williams, thank you for joining us today on NRB Live. We're grateful for you and for 5Q and just the way that you help equip all of our important ministries. You mentioned one of them, Revive Our Hearts, but you work with a number of others as well, and really helping to get the good news of the gospel around the world. And it's ministries like this in many ways are kind of the back end of some of our really important gospel work that is happening. And so we want to thank you, Chad, and your whole team for this. And want to encourage you to check out 5Q if you can. But I want to thank everyone for watching, and whether it's on Facebook or YouTube. And if you enjoyed this, please share it on your Facebook page or YouTube. If you missed the first part of it, you can always go back. It'll be archived there. And stay tuned. Obviously, we'll continue to have more of these once a month as we feature some really important content and ideas to equip us to be an association of Christian communicators. So thank you for joining us today.
Dan, thank you for the invitation. And it's a real pleasure, and just exciting to see everything that NRB continues to be just relevant in the marketplace. And yeah, like you said, I would encourage everybody to go to the conference. You'll be able to expose yourself to the new things, the dynamic things are constantly changing. And yeah, thanks a lot for having me.
Thank you, Chad. I appreciate it. And we want to thank all of you for listening. And for now, we'll sign off, and we'll be back.